You've probably heard the story. World War I kicked off with a single gunshot. But is it really that simple? Today, we're going to unravel the incredibly complex web of events that plunged the world into catastrophe. And yeah, it all starts with one single fateful moment.
I mean, really think about that for a second. How did one bullet, fired in a city most people at the time couldn't even point to on a map, lead to a war that would completely reshape the world? Let's follow the trail from that one shot all the way to the trenches.
You know, every massive fire starts with just a tiny spark. For World War I, that spark was an assassination. So let's meet the man whose death was about to set the entire world on fire.
This guy right here is Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and he wasn't just some royal with a fancy title. He was the next in line to rule the huge, sprawling Austro-Hungarian Empire. He was the future, and in the summer of 1914, that made him a target. So, let's set the scene. The place is Sarajevo, a city just simmering with political tension. And the date, June 28, 1914, was about to become one of the most infamous days in modern history. And the man who pulled the trigger? A young guy named Gavrilo Princip. He was a passionate nationalist who was convinced that violence was the only language the Austro-Hungarian Empire would understand. For him, this wasn't murder, it was an act of revolution.
Okay, but here's the thing. An assassination, even if someone this important, doesn't just happen in a vacuum. To really get why this one lit a global fire, we have to look at the situation in Europe in 1914. The continent was basically a giant powder keg, just waiting for a match. And there were four big forces tearing it apart.
First up, you've got militarism. Just think of it as a massive, continent-wide arms race. Every major country was building bigger armies, faster battleships, and more powerful weapons. They weren't just preparing for a potential war, they were actively planning for it, down to the last train schedule.
Next, and this part is absolutely crucial, was a tangled mess of alliances. Europe was covered in these secret treaties and public pacts. It basically meant that a little disagreement between two countries could become everybody's problem overnight. The whole system was like a series of tripwires.
So, Europe was split into two big armed camps. On one side, you had the Triple Entente. That's France, Russia, and the United Kingdom. And in the other corner, the Triple Alliance, Germany and Austria-Hungary. These weren't just friendly rivals. They were two teams staring each other down, ready for a fight.
The third force was imperialism. All these European powers were in a mad scramble for colonies and resources all over the globe. This global competition just fueled more jealousy and mistrust. So a dispute over some territory in Africa could easily add to the tension back home in Europe.
And finally, the fourth force, nationalism. And we're not just talking about patriotism here. This was an intense, sometimes aggressive belief that your nation was superior. This feeling was boiling over in the Balkans, where people like Gavrilo Princip dreamed of freeing themselves from foreign rule and were willing to kill to make it happen.
So, you have the spark, the assassination, and you have the powder keg, all that tension from militarism, alliances, and everything else. Now let's watch the dominoes fall. This is how a local crisis in the Balkans spiraled out of control and became a world war.
Just look at how fast this all happens. First, Austria-Hungary is furious, and with its powerful ally Germany backing it up, it sends Serbia this list of demands that was basically impossible to accept. When Serbia can't agree to everything, bam, domino number one, Austria-Hungary declares war. Well, that triggers Russia, who sees itself as the protector of Serbia, to start mobilizing its huge army. Germany sees this and declares war on Russia and on Russia's ally, France. Then, to get to France quickly, Germany invades neutral Belgium. And that's the final domino. Invading a neutral country brings the British Empire into the war. And just like that, in a little over a month, all the great powers of Europe were at war with each other.
It's just a dizzying chain of events, right? It's so easy to get lost in the details. But when we step back, you can see this terrifyingly clear path from one single crisis to a global catastrophe. And understanding that path is maybe more important now than ever.
So here's the key takeaway, the thing to remember. The assassination wasn't the cause of the war, it was the excuse. The real problem was this system of alliances, so rigid and tangled up that it turned a local fight into a global inferno. The whole thing was a house of cards, and Gavrilo Princip just pulled out the first one.
And that leaves all of us with a pretty chilling question, doesn't it? We live in a world that's just as interconnected, with alliances that are just as complex.
The story of 1914 isn't just history, it's a warning. Are we really any safer from a similar chain reaction today?